The Stoic path to break free from your inner prison. Stoicism. Have you ever felt like you're fighting an invisible enemy? And that enemy is you? There are moments when it's not the world that's holding you back. It's your own expectations, your unresolved fears, your inner critic whispering that you're not good enough. You do everything right, yet somehow keep sabotaging your progress. You dream of emotional freedom, but find yourself stuck in the same patterns again and again. And the most terrifying part? You don't even realize the keys to your prison have always been in your pocket. In this video, we'll explore one of the most subtle and devastating aspects of the human mind, self-sabotage. When you become not only the one trapped, but also the one tightening the chains. When your distorted self-image, internal rigidity, and old emotional wounds shape the walls around you, until you start mistaking the prison for your personality. But what if I told you that there is a path that can lead you out of this inner labyrinth? Not a quick fix or motivational high, but a radical shift in perspective, grounded in ancient wisdom. That path is Stoicism. The insights of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca weren't meant to be admired in books. They were forged in chaos, pain, and pressure. And today, they offer us the clarity to see why we imprison ourselves and how to break free. Not with false promises, but with self-awareness, with virtue, with inner strength. Stoicism is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending to be unaffected. It's about learning to respond with wisdom and integrity, even when everything inside you wants to give up. So if you're ready to face the real prison, the one built from within, stay with me until the end of this video. Because this may not just be an intellectual journey. This might be the moment you begin to feel what true freedom actually means. The origin of the prison, when your self-image locks you in. It all starts with a story, but not a story you consciously chose to tell. It was written over time, piece by piece, with words from other people, moments you couldn't fully process, and silent comparisons you made without realizing it. That story becomes your self-concept, the image you hold of who you believe you are. And here's the danger: that image doesn't just describe you, it defines your limits. If you grew up hearing you were too sensitive, too weak, too emotional, too intense, chances are you internalize those labels without questioning them. And now, even if you don't consciously remember them, they still echo in the back of your mind. Every time you step into something new, a voice inside you whispers, "You're not good enough," and you obey. You retreat. You shrink back into the mental cage that feels familiar, even if it slowly suffocates you. Stoicism invites us to look at that inner construction with clarity and courage. Epictetus reminds us, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That same logic applies to ourselves. The problem is not who we are, but how we interpret who we believe we are. When those interpretations are based on fear, shame, or outdated roles, they become traps. You don't fail because you're incapable. You fail because you're loyal to a broken version of your identity. The Stoic understands that identity is not fixed. It can and must be examined. Each time you act with awareness, defying your old mental scripts, you open a crack in the prison wall. It's not easy, it's not instant, but it's real. And here's the truth. You are not your past. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who can observe your thoughts and decide what to do with them. So maybe the question isn't, who am I? Maybe the real question is, who have I been out of habit, and who could I become with intention? The fear of freedom, when the self feels safer than the open world. Have you ever wondered why you keep going back to the same toxic habits, the same draining relationships, the same inner loops that leave you exhausted? Why do we sabotage ourselves when we're about to grow? Why do we return to the familiar pain, even when we say we want to be free? Here's a hard truth. Sometimes we fear freedom more than we fear suffering. Yes, suffering hurts, but at least it's predictable. You know its shape. You've rehearsed the disappointment. You've made a home in discomfort, because the unknown feels more dangerous than the pain you've already memorized. But here's the catch. Freedom demands responsibility. It demands presence. It asks you to stop hiding behind excuses, stop blaming the past, and start deciding who you will become today. Stoicism doesn't promise comfort, it promises clarity. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if it's endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. That applies not only to external challenges, but to the emotional chaos within. Complaining about the prison is easy. Walking out of it and facing the world on your own 2 feet, that's where the real work begins. Because once you let go of your chains, there's no one left to blame. And for many, that's terrifying. We say we want freedom, but unconsciously we cling to the identity that's built around being broken, rejected, misunderstood. We become loyal to our pain because it tells us who we are. Freedom threatens that. It wipes the slate clean and says, now it's up to you. And that's the moment many turn back. But the Stoic doesn't turn back. The Stoic takes a deep breath and walks forward, not because there's no fear, but because there's something greater than fear: virtue. A commitment to becoming someone better, regardless of how uncomfortable that path may be. So ask yourself, do you truly want to be free? Or are you still finding safety in the pain that once protected you? The loops that bind you, thoughts that quietly build mental walls. Some prisons aren't made of iron or stone, but of thoughts. Automatic, repeated, unquestioned thoughts that shape how you see the world and yourself. I'll never be good enough. This always goes wrong. There's no point in trying. These aren't just passing ideas. They are scripts you've rehearsed so often that they feel like facts, but they aren't facts. They're habits of perception, and they quietly dictate how you live. Most people don't even realize how deeply conditioned they are by these internal loops. You think you're making choices freely, but really, you're reacting to beliefs formed years ago. Perhaps in childhood, perhaps in moments of trauma or rejection. You don't move forward because part of you still believes it's not safe to be seen. Not safe to try. Not safe to hope. Stoicism offers a sharp and sobering response to this mental fog. You are not your thoughts, you are the one who can examine them. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb us, but the judgments we place on them. The same applies inwardly. It's not your failures that hurt you, it's what you tell yourself they mean. It's not the silence of others that destroys you, it's the story you create about why you're not enough. The Stoic path is not about ignoring your thoughts, it's about disciplining them. It's about watching what arises in your mind and asking, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this aligned with reality or with a fear I've never confronted? This is not toxic positivity. This is radical responsibility. You can't always choose what thoughts show up, but you can choose which ones you believe, which ones you feed, and which ones you starve. And here's where the power lies. Each time you interrupt a destructive pattern, you weaken the prison. Each time you replace automatic judgment with conscious reasoning, you take back a piece of your mind. And over time, those new neural paths become stronger, until you no longer live in reaction, but in response. Not enslaved by fear, but guided by clarity. So if your mind feels like a loop you can't escape, don't just try to break it with willpower. Train it with wisdom. That's what the Stoics did. And that's how freedom begins, not with control, but with awareness. The weight of what you don't face, how repressed emotions become invisible chains. Some of the heaviest chains you carry are the emotions you refuse to feel. The sadness you buried, the anger you swallowed, the guilt you've carried for years without ever asking, was this mine to carry? These emotions don't simply disappear. They settle deep inside. And over time, they show up in disguise as anxiety, overthinking, burnout, perfectionism, or unexplained frustration. You don't recognize them as emotions anymore. You start to believe they're just who you are. You call it being stuck, unmotivated, or emotionally numb. But underneath it all, There's unresolved pain waiting to be seen, heard, and processed. The Stoics didn't teach repression. They taught resilience. Seneca wrote, "It is not the pain that harms us, but the fear of the pain." Avoiding emotion only increases its power over you. Facing it with reason, integrity, and presence begins to dissolve its grip. True Stoicism isn't about becoming a robot. It's about becoming whole. Not by eliminating emotion, but by engaging with it consciously. When you repress emotion, you don't get rid of it. You hand it the keys to your behavior. You become reactive, easily triggered, or emotionally distant. Not because you're cold, but because your emotional system is overloaded and unprocessed. Facing your inner emotional world is an act of quiet strength. It's looking at what hurts and saying, "I see you. I'm ready now." And when you do that, something powerful happens. You shrink the shadows, you gain clarity, you stop running. The Stoic doesn't avoid fear, grief, or anger. He investigates them. He asks, "What is this trying to teach me? What judgment or belief lies underneath this pain?" And through that investigation, a shift occurs, from reaction to understanding, from chaos to peace. Freedom isn't about never feeling anything. It's about being able to feel without being dominated by it. So ask yourself, what have you been avoiding feeling, and how much of your life has been shaped by that avoidance? Because sometimes the most painful emotion is the one that's been waiting too long to be felt. Invisible inheritance: how unconscious beliefs quietly shape your inner prison. You weren't born afraid to fail. You didn't come into the world believing you were unworthy, or that love must be earned, or that you had to be perfect to be accepted. Those beliefs were given to you, passed down like furniture in a house, inherited without question. They came from glances, unspoken expectations, repeated phrases, cultural conditioning, or family dynamics you didn't choose but learned to survive in. Over time, those subtle messages became internal laws, and eventually, you stopped noticing them altogether. That's what makes unconscious beliefs so dangerous. They don't scream. They whisper. They become the quiet rules you live by. They influence how you love, how you work, how you see yourself, and all without you realizing they were never yours to begin with. You start to say things like, "This is just who I am," but is it? Or is it who you became to be accepted, to stay safe, to avoid rejection? Stoicism calls you to examine everything, especially your own thoughts. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." So if your thoughts are colored by fear, guilt, or scarcity, then your actions and your life will reflect those tones. The Stoic practice begins with a courageous question. Did I choose this belief, or did someone else choose it for me? That one question can change your life. Because once you realize that some of the most limiting ideas you live by were unconsciously adopted, you gain the power to rewrite them, to break inherited cycles, to stop calling loyalty what is actually just fear of disapproval. You don't honor your past by repeating its patterns. You honor it by evolving beyond them. And that's the Stoic path, not a blind devotion to tradition, but a deliberate construction of a life guided by reason, not reaction. You don't need to be what the world told you to be. You don't need to stay small to stay loved. You don't need to carry beliefs that were planted in you by people who never saw your full potential. Freedom begins the moment you ask, "What do I truly believe, now as the person I'm choosing to become?" The illusion of control, when trying to master everything means you haven't mastered yourself. Do you constantly try to predict, plan, or prepare for every possible outcome? Do you obsess over how people perceive you, replay conversations in your mind, or feel unsettled when things don't go as expected? This need to control everything, every reaction, every outcome, every perception, may look like discipline, but at its core, it's anxiety. It's the fear that if you don't hold everything together, everything will fall apart, including you. Here's the hard truth. The world was never under your control. Not the people, not the timing, not the outcomes. And the more you try to hold it all in your hands, the more your hands tremble under the weight. What most people don't realize is that this obsessive need for control is actually a reflection of inner instability. You try to master everything out there because you haven't yet learned how to feel safe in here. But the Stoics knew this trap well. Epictetus taught that the first step to peace is recognizing the line between what depends on you and what doesn't. Yes, your choices, yes, your values, absolutely. But other people's behavior, circumstances, outcomes, never. Trying to control the uncontrollable is a guaranteed recipe for frustration, resentment, and exhaustion. Letting go doesn't mean being passive. It means being wise. It means channeling your energy toward the one place where it can actually make a difference, your own mind and actions. And when you do that, when you stop trying to manage everyone and everything, something shifts. You breathe deeper. You react less. You begin to feel grounded, not because the world changed, but because you did. The Stoic doesn't find peace by fixing the world. He finds peace by fixing his focus. You don't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. And often, that's not just enough. It's everything. So ask yourself, where have you been trying to force control instead of building strength? And what might happen if, just for today, you focus not on outcomes, but on excellence in your response? Because in the end, true control begins where illusion ends and clarity begins. When the need to be flawless becomes a new kind of cage. Do you constantly feel like you're not doing enough, even when you're exhausted? Like no matter how much you accomplish, it never feels quite right, never feels like you're enough? That voice inside, the one that whispers, do more, be better, you're still not there. It doesn't come from your highest self. It comes from the part of you that learned somewhere along the way that love, worth, and safety had to be earned through perfection. This kind of inner dialogue might sound like ambition or high standards, but in reality, it's a form of emotional self-punishment. And the worst part? It never ends. Because perfection isn't a finish line. It's a moving target, a cage with no door. And the more you chase it, the more you lose touch with who you truly are. We live in a culture that celebrates productivity over peace. That confuses achievement with identity. That trains you to believe you're only valuable when you're performing. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. It doesn't ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be virtuous. And that's not the same thing. Virtue isn't about flawlessness, it's about intention. It's about doing what's right with wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control. Even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect. Marcus Aurelius wasn't perfect, neither was Epictetus, nor Seneca. And yet they left behind a legacy of clarity and strength. Not because they never failed, but because they never stopped trying to live with virtue. The perfectionist mindset says, you must earn your worth. The Stoic mindset says, you already have worth, now act in alignment with it. That shift is everything. Because when you drop the need to be flawless, you make space to be real, to grow, to breathe, to live. So ask yourself, are you striving for excellence or hiding behind perfection? Are you pushing yourself to evolve or punishing yourself because you think you're not already enough? Freedom comes when you stop demanding perfection and start practicing integrity. Because in the end, it's not about never falling. It's about getting up with honesty and walking forward with intention. The approval trap, when your freedom belongs to everyone but you. How many of your decisions are shaped not by what you believe, but by what others might think? How often do you hold back, shrink, hesitate, or overextend yourself just to avoid being judged, rejected, or misunderstood? At some point, the fear of being unliked became stronger than the desire to be true. You started living for applause, for smiles, for validation. And gradually, you stopped living for yourself. This is one of the most deceptive forms of self-imprisonment. It doesn't look like fear, It looks like kindness, diplomacy, humility, but deep down, it's dependence. It's the belief that you are only as valuable as other people say you are. And that's a dangerous illusion. The Stoics knew this trap well. Epictetus said it plainly. If you want to please everyone, prepare to sacrifice your freedom. Because the moment your worth depends on other people's approval, you've handed them control of your identity. You've given away your inner peace for a fragile currency. Likes, compliments, validation. The Stoic, by contrast, measures worth not by perception, but by conscience. He doesn't act to be praised. He acts to be just. He doesn't speak to be liked. He speaks to uphold truth. He doesn't live for the crowd. He lives for his principles. This doesn't mean you become cold or careless. It means you become rooted. You start to draw confidence from within, not from reactions. And ironically, that's when people trust you more, because they sense that you're not bending to fit into their expectations. But this shift isn't easy. It takes courage to risk being misunderstood. It takes maturity to accept that not everyone will approve of you, and that you don't need them to. Your job is not to be everyone's favorite. Your job is to be faithful to your values, even when it's uncomfortable. So ask yourself, what parts of you are still performing? Whose approval are you still chasing, and what would happen if you stopped? Because the truth is, you don't need the world to say yes. You need to stop saying no to yourself. And that is where real freedom begins. Freedom is trained. How Stoicism builds inner strength from the inside out. By now, you've seen that the deepest prison isn't built with walls. It's built with habits, old patterns, outdated beliefs, emotions avoided, stories you inherited but never questioned. But what now? How do you break those chains? This is where many philosophies stop with insight. But Stoicism goes further. It's not just a lens through which to see the world. It's a daily discipline that strengthens your mind like a muscle. Epictetus said, "No great thing is created suddenly." The same goes for freedom. You don't wake up one day transformed. You become free by practicing the habits of a free person, one clear, intentional choice at a time. And it begins with the cornerstone of Stoic thought, the dichotomy of control. Learn to separate what depends on you, your thoughts, values, actions, from what doesn't, other people's behavior, external events, outcomes. Then, stop wasting energy on what isn't yours to manage. Each time you bring your focus back to what's within, you reclaim a piece of your power. Then there's the Stoic nightly reflection, a quiet ritual where you examine the day. Did I live with courage? Did I act with justice? Did I control what I could and release what I couldn't? Marcus Aurelius did this, not to shame himself, but to grow, to become less reactive, more intentional. Because that's what freedom really is, mastery over your own response. Another tool is negative visualization, imagining loss, change, or difficulty in advance. Not to suffer twice, but to prepare the soul. To remind yourself that everything can change, and that peace comes not from clinging, but from clarity. None of this is glamorous, but it's real. And it works. Because each time you choose a virtuous thought over a compulsive one, each time you act from principle instead of fear, each time you pause before reacting, you break a link in the chain. And over time, what once felt like a mental prison becomes a place of power. You stop being dominated by what happens to you and start being defined by how you respond to it. So ask yourself, what if freedom isn't something to find, but something to build from the inside out? The final key: freedom begins the moment you choose to be free. By now it's clear. Your prison was never made of circumstances. It was made of thoughts, fears, unquestioned beliefs, old emotional wounds dressed as identities, and stories you've repeated so often that they started to sound like truth. Some of those stories were given to you. Some were built in pain. Some were strategies for survival that turned into limitations, but they all share something in common. They only hold power as long as you believe in them. Yes, there were things you didn't choose, moments of loss, words that hurt, people who failed you. But what you choose to do with all of that now is yours. This is the heart of Stoicism. It doesn't offer escape. It offers awakening, a shift from "why is this happening to me?" to "what will I choose in response?" Seneca said, "Part of the cure is the desire to be cured." In other words, no one can free you from yourself until you decide to be free. And that decision isn't loud, it's not dramatic. It happens in quiet, private moments. When you stop feeding the lie. When you pause instead of reacting. When you speak your truth, even when your voice trembles. The moment you stop letting old patterns define you. The moment you stop needing approval to feel worthy. The moment you choose reason over reaction. That's the moment the door unlocks. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not forever. But enough to remind you. You're not your fear. You're not your past. You're not your worst moment. You are the one who can observe all of that. And still act with wisdom. And that's power no one can take from you. So now the real question is, will you keep holding the key, or will you finally use it? Because in the end, the prison only holds you, as long as you choose to stay inside. Now that you understand how the deepest prison is the one you build within, and that freedom is a choice you make daily, there's one more question. What if you've left the prison, but you're still carrying the voices, fears, and scars of those who locked you there? In the next episode, we'll explore how to heal emotional wounds from the past and rebuild trust in yourself through the wisdom of Stoicism. Because sometimes, what keeps you stuck isn't what happened, but what you keep repeating inside long after it's over. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your journey to inner strength is just beginning, and we're walking it together. See you in the next episode.